Hello everyone, I'm GGian and this is the Wales FM Fireside Chat with Artists. In this show we talk about everything and anything art and crypto with designers and creators alike in the NFT space, otherwise known as non-fungible tokens. Today we have a very special guest. It's Ekaitza, he's one of our chief partners and he's famous for his 3D artworks, especially his schools. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hear from Ekaitza. How you doing, man?
Bom dia, irmão. Prazer falar com você. Como está?
Look at that, perfect. I didn't know you spoke Portuguese, man.
I speak a little bit. It's pretty easy for somebody that speaks Spanish to speak Portuguese. I think it's just a little bit of practice.
You know, I wouldn't say that I can do the other way around. I cannot do Spanish at all.
It's just a little bit. It's just a little bit of tequila, and we get you going.
All right, how you doing? How you doing?
Doing good, man. Starting the year, I took a month off in December. I was a little sick. Nothing major, just allergies that got complicated based on my stubbornness. So if you hear me cough, it's because I'm still recovering. But thankfully, we have drugs, and drugs helped me open my chest. So I had a few emergency pills that I used, and
Oh no.
back to normal, and starting to catch up on the year. But everything's good. We're happy to be here.
Oh damn! I wish you a speed recovery, man.
Thank you.
So, what I would like to know first, if you want to give us a brief introduction on your, like, what's your formal education that you have in art? I heard that you worked with artificial intelligence and like technological development. Did that influence your evolution as an artist?
Yeah, that's a good question. So hi everyone, my name is Javier, or Javo, as friends called me. And then after years of being in the space, I started to interview artists. And then I started to do art under the pseudonym of Ekaitza, or Ekaitza in Basque, which means storm. So that's why people call me Javo or Ekaitza. So that's the reason why that's happening. In terms of my background, I'm formally trained or I went to school as an engineer. So I'm an electrical engineer and a computer engineer. So I did both. So I did anywhere from fields and waves to semiconductors to antennas to coding. And that got me into technology. I did coding for about 5 minutes before I decided that I wanted to do something else. So I did speech applications, neural networks, artificial intelligence, and that moved me into the Bay Area. And ever since, I've been doing research, development. I've written a lot of patents around artificial intelligence and neural networks. I think I have 12 or 13 patents around that. So does it influence what I do? I think everything that we do influences what we do. A lot of what I create is related to futurism, or the VR headset, for example, that I think you're going to be asking about, are related to that. So from our current state, where do we progress? So I don't think on a practical perspective. I think in a theoretical and conceptual perspective, definitely has been an influence on what I've done. And I have huge respect for those that have actually implemented technology into what they do, either by generative art, or by coding, or by implementing other means technology into their art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on that line, have you ever managed to connect both areas, like either in a practical or conceptual way? Like, do you have the intention to, not necessarily just the AI part, but like the coding and the technology part?
Yeah, the artificial intelligence is just a fancy term for coding, right? So it's a different type of coding, but it's coding in the end. So right, it's automating some processes. So definitely, a lot of what I do you don't see. So I was trying to code a bot that would blend two types of people tweeting. So, for example, you get Nouriel Rubini or somebody that's very anti-crypto, and then you get somebody positive, and then for the bot to blend them into one specific tweet, right? To see if what comes out of it. So that's definitely, I don't know if that's art, but you can use that approach and implement it into creating something. Can I do the same to create colors, pixels, uh, textures? For sure. Let's see if I do something in the future. But on a conceptual perspective, for sure, I've implemented that. From a practical perspective, it's yet to be done.
I see. Yeah, because often people think of like uh, doing art with like generative art, kind of stuff when it comes to code.
Right.
But I guess that what you just said would be a different approach.
It is. I mean, it's just the beginning, right? So, for example, what the guys at Async Art are doing in terms of programmatic features into the art, it's awesome, but it's just the beginning. You'll see a lot of more of that happening in the future. And artificial intelligence will help. Should we use artificial intelligence to be the ultimate creator? I don't think so. The human component will always be there, but it's just the beginning.
Interesting that you dabble on that point, because one thing that often is discussed, we have discussed with plenty artists on this Fireside chat, is like the importance of the skill and the vision, or like the spectrum where a few people rely mostly on their vision, few people rely mostly on their skill. And how do you think this will evolve over time with the evolution of technology?
So we have really strong tools, impressive tools that can do a lot of the work. So probably a few months ago, you saw artists debating whether using a tool or relying heavily on the tool would render the final result. And it's a very valid conversation. There's people on both sides. You can use the same tools that I use and create something completely different. And that's what's valuable to me. When I collect, I look into that. I look into, are you offering a fresh perspective into what's already out there? Or are you just leveraging the tools that I can use and producing something very similar? So it's an interesting conversation, man. I think the tools are getting better and will get better. That only puts pressure on the artist to produce something much better.
Interesting. Yeah, I see. You touched a little bit of what I am about to ask you next, because I feel like you have somewhat of a unique perspective on this space, being both an artist and a collector. Does that provide you with some insights or advices that you would give to new creators on how to approach the market, given that you have this perspective on both sides?
Being a creative, I don't know if I should call myself an artist. I'm always experimenting in different areas where I don't know if I'm comfortable with the artist uh, title, but I definitely a creative. But being a creative and a collector just means that you're broke all the time, because any money that you make selling art, just put it back in. So it's that. First of all, that's what happens. It's interesting because it does influence what you do. For example, when I'm putting out an artwork or a series of artworks, I'm thinking about the collectors. I'm thinking about how do I add value to my previous collectors. You probably have seen me in the
Mm-hmm.
past buy some of the old works that I had put out there and retire them and then refresh them. So from a collector perspective, I'm always looking out for pieces that will transcend, pieces that offer something new, but also that give me some return. So it's an interesting um, combination because you're on both sides of the spectrum. Does it give me an opportunity to give somebody advice in terms of how to approach creating? Um, Everybody can do what they want, and the approach that everybody uses can be unique. One thing I've based on my experience is that I would have tokenized less in the beginning. I would experiment it a lot more. Once you start tokenizing and selling, it gives you such a rush that you want to keep on doing it. And sometimes it's not, at least I'm thinking about myself, is not as polished as I would have liked. And then you have the other
Mm-hmm.
artists that have been creating for many years, and then they basically start tokenizing their portfolio for the last 7-10 years. And the question there is this what you want to be remembered for? And if the answer is yes, perfect. Have you learned anything in the last year or two based on the portfolio that you're uploading that will give us a better perspective? Because once you put it on the blockchain, it'll be there for perpetuity, and you'll see those images over and over again on Twitter or anywhere else. So if you're a new artist, if you're testing the waters, if you're learning, produce more until you find something that you're totally in love with, and either a team or a theme or a brand or whatever, and then tokenize. If you're an existing artist, tokenizing what's in the past or what you've done in the past, make sure that it's still representing what you want to give out to the world.
Damn, that's a very interesting point. I feel like a lot of people expect some sort of evolution or progression or cohesiveness throughout the artist's work. And I definitely see a few newcomers, they try and dabble in many different styles, and then it's harder for the market to understand their concept at first. For them, they explore new places, you know. So
Right.
yeah, it's yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Uh, Also, like when you are collecting, what are you looking for on the pieces that you do collect?
As a collector, I'm terrible because I'm looking at it from the artist perspective. Because so I'm looking for something that speaks to me, either from an approach, from a technique perspective, or somebody that I've have a connection with. So a lot of the art that I connect is people that I have a bond with. So, for example, Giant Swan is somebody that I talk to on a regular basis. He has a beautiful soul. I love his work. So it definitely influences what I collect. I like color. My life is very interesting because on my regular day-to-day basis, I'm always wearing black, and my house is very minimalistic. And then what I do and what I collect is very colorful. So it speaks in terms of what you're, I don't know, desiring or something. But from a collector perspective, it's something that offers me a new perspective. Is somebody that I trust, or I have deep empathy for, or have that connection with, or something that I know how they approached it, and I have a lot of respect because I didn't think of that, right? So those would be my decision points.
Mm-hmm.
I care less about who or where the artist is ranked. If an artist is, because now I'm seeing a lot of rankings in terms of artists, and I could care less. If you're number 950 or you're number one, I could care less. If I like the piece and I have a good connection with you, and I have a good connection with the piece, I will collect it. That I would tell you. So I pay less attention in terms of who's popular. I pay more of attention on the artists and the pieces they produce.
Interesting. This is the one I can't ask the artists that are not collectors, but I will ask you. Do you collect the pieces or the artists? Like what weights in more?
It's interesting. I have one-offs or a series of artworks from artists that I don't think are no longer around, but I'm still pretty fond of their pieces. And then there's definitely artworks that I collect because I like the artist and I like what they produce, and I'm sure that I'm gonna like what they produce in the future. So, for example, Ban is one of them. Mankind is one of them. There's artists that I just know that I'm gonna invest in them because I know what they're going to be producing in the future is nice. But I'm perfectly fine if I find the one off. So, for example, Ophelia Fu, which she doesn't tokenize as much as she's an Italian artist. Sometimes I grab one or two of her pieces because I just like what she produces from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now, for the next section, I would appreciate if you could share a screen so we can take a look at your works while we go.
Okay. Yeah, one
Perfect.
second. Let me share a screen here. Hopefully you'll see it, and then I'm gonna do screen. Okay, hopefully you'll see my second screen in a second. Let me know when you do.
Yes, I can see, I think.
Is it just dark, or you see an image?
No, I'm seeing an image. Yes, I'm seeing
Okay,
an
perfect.
explosion. Very colorful.
Okay, perfect. Explosion of color. So very different from what I typically. This is nothing new. This is just the ones from Apple that are just scrolling on the screen. So this is the one that's up today. All right. So what do you want me to show you?
First thing, like in a more broad sense, throughout your works. On the symbolism behind your works, your most recurring themes seems to be schools and VR headsets. What are the sentiments that you're trying to evoke in regards to death and the perception of reality?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So there's a few themes that are recurring. So futurism is one. So you'll see futurism. I think there's female models with VR headsets and VR headset across what I produce. The VR headset is just a symbolism in terms of how we look into the future and how we produce something that's new. You'll see VR headset also being used on classic sculptures because I have a deep fascination for classical art. I'm fortunate that I've been able to study art and being able to see a lot of these sculptures and physical pieces in person. So I have a fascination for classical art, but I also have a fascination for what those pieces capture at that moment. So, for example, if you see the Doryphoros, if you see the nymph, those are pieces that transcend into posterity and give you a good perspective
Mm-hmm.
into what happened in the past. So, what I try to do is I try to modernize those to see how will people interpret us in the future. So, it's a combination of classical art and modernism that I find really appealing. And the schools, man, I it's interesting because if you would have asked me 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if I would be doing skull related art, I would have not guessed that that would be the case. First, I love symmetry. I love the proportions of a human skull in a human head. I think it's pretty proportionate. So I love from that perspective the aesthetics of it. And then skulls is just a fascination beyond the shape and form. I think that ultimately, whoever we try to portray it to be, we're all basically the same underneath, right? So, and then you pair that with the punk theme, and you with a bit of a call to kind of wake up and rise, which you'll see a lot of those symbolisms in my art. Is just to say, hey, we're all the same, but it's what makes you different is what you desire to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the sculptures with the VR red sets, they produce this very interesting dichotomy because it's somewhat of like such a new thing with such an old thing, and yeah, and about like the
Right.
perception.
So this is the Doryphoros. So the Doryphoros is a Greek sculpture that was made to showcase the human form, the human body in perfect uh, symmetry. The Greeks were really into that. But what I've done in here is I added a beer headset. I've added some hair. I added a beard. So I tend to modify these from time to time. There's not much you can modify if you want to keep them honest to what they were. But this
Mhm.
is just a good combination of old and new. And then I really wanted to do a grimy feel or texture, and then completely decompose the red over the black. So it just came out like that. So it's a good example of modern versus classic. And in terms of the schools, let me see if I can bring one of these here. Um, yes, for example, this one. Hopefully, you're seeing the graphite skull. This one was really difficult to make. First, because these are shards. These are, I mean, it's obviously not hair. These are not triangles, so they actually go
Mhm.
into the skull. So I tried. So you have to kind of really make sure that they don't follow through because it's this is a three. Although you're seeing it in 2D, these are 3D. And then what I like to do is place them in a different set of positions so the light hits them differently, right? So the fact that they're not perfectly aligned is intentional, just to make sure that the light
Mhm.
reflects a bit different. This was a very technical piece to make sure that the texture and the light work together. It's just one that I love, and I think it's still up there on super rare. Yep.
So this is a very interesting thing that you touched upon, is that you really appreciate symmetry, and you have, for example, the perfect body, and like the depiction that you're making is is from a symmetric object, such as the schools, for example, but the piece
Mhm.
themselves are not, right? So this is like an interesting theme that you have throughout your work.
And throughout life, I think it's just the obsession to be symmetrical in the sense that, for example, I have two screens in front of me. I have my keyboard in the middle. Just symmetry is something that speaks to us, I guess, natively. So that's something that I see, right? So sometimes I spend too much time correcting something that otherwise for somebody would be meaningless or hard to even notice. But for me, that's what makes it much more special.
Yeah, I relate. I really, really appreciate symmetry.
And then I can show you. Let me see if I don't think a lot of people have seen this. So this is one of the early ones that I did. I think this is one of the first 3D
Oh,
artworks that I
damn.
produced. This is, but you can see the errors, right? So for example, I was overlaying a British flag here, and then you'll see that this gets pixelated. This gives you a good understanding of. First, I was using images that were wrong. They were overlaying over the school, and then you'll see the light is all over the place, right? So there's reflection and on this side. So I was learning. It's still a piece that I really like, and I gifted it to Hakatao.
Hmm.
But I don't think a lot of people have seen this piece. But it just shows you how you start progressing as an artist, where you produce something like this with the same tools, and then you go to something that's a bit more like with this one, for example, that I did for Whale. That is, it's just much more complex in terms of technique, in terms of reflection, in terms of materials. But that just
Hmm.
shows you a little bit of progression. At some point, I think I'll go in and make a new version of that one. But I don't know. I really like that piece in the beginning, and I think I still do.
I mean, I think it's super cool. I had never seen. I think most here probably did it as well, and I'm not sure if I would have been able to spot it if it wasn't for you saying, "Oh, here's the mistake." Uh, but yeah,
And that's
this,
the thing, man. And that's the thing, right? You tokenize it and you see it everywhere, and it's at least for the artist, it's so annoying to find the errors. And I think the errors makes it perfect in the end, or makes it extra special. But that's one of the things when going back to the new artist, make sure that you're in love with where you're tokenizing because you're going to be
Mhm.
seeing it everywhere. And unless you make like a trade with the collector to retire a piece and then update it, you're going to be seeing it, right? So I think it's part of the fun, but definitely you're going to be spotting your own errors.
Yeah, it's usually something that people struggle a lot is to call a piece done or completed or like to stop working on something. And when
Mhm.
you're doing like your L, when you doing on paper, you don't need to bring it out to the world. You know, you still can decide after and come back and modify. But after it's minted, I feel like this aggravates this entire anxiety of like how to bring closure to the pieces. So it's
Yeah, I think
interesting that you pointed out. Yeah.
I've heard a few artists quote of a specific or use a specific quote that says that art is never finished; it's always abandoned, or it's abandoned, it's never finished.
Hmm.
Which I think it's true, right? So at some point you make the decision and say, perfect. So this is going to be what I put out there, but you could always do a little bit more for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a few questions about the meaning behind some specific pieces.
Mhm.
Uh, could you tell us a bit more about the piece that you did for the whale liquidity mining program, Atuar por Instinto?
Okay, yeah. So actuar por instinto, which means act by instinct in Spanish, and I think you've collected that piece. Let me just
I
bring it up
did,
here,
yes. Yeah.
and
I'm
I see
not
that.
biased, all right? I'm not biased. I just want to know.
All right, so this is a piece. So it's interesting, man. So a lot of people, once they see the art, they start thinking that I'm pushing for rebellion or something. The reality is that the meaning, at least for me, it's deeper than that. So actuar por instinto, acting by instinct. I wanted to do a more visceral piece, something that was more in your face, and then you'll see that it says rise here. And I'm less
Mhm.
inclined about rising against a government or anything. It's more rise against yourself, your beliefs, rise against fear or your limitations of not doing what you want to do based on what other people might say. Um, it's such a good feeling to be able to step up and do whatever you want to do without fear. So you'll see that recurring theme in my pieces. I don't know if anybody knows. I think I've told Well Shark and Jim that when I was younger, I used to do martial arts, and somebody kicking your face or punching your face gives you a feeling of you need to do something, you need to survive, and that feeling goes away as we grow older. I think you start sitting behind the keyboard and a mouse and a screen, and that visceral feeling of you trying to step up and do something and survive, and it's very it's normal. It's something that you should always pursue. So that's the meaning behind this, right? So it's just a call for somebody to do what they're always wanting to do, to rise up to the occasion and act by instinct, which is the name of the piece.
Damn. Yeah. I love that. I really do. I love my piece more now. I'm glad I asked. uh, there's another one. On the select works by Ekaitza, the piece attribute to Yayoi stands to me for having a very unique color palette. What was the inspiration for that piece?
You're talking about this one, right? Yeah. Just so there's a Japanese art, so it's a tribute to Yayoi. And Yayoi, it's Yayoi Kusama. It's a Japanese artist. She should be around 91 now. So she's an incredible artist. She lives in a mental institution in Japan now, in Tokyo. She decided to move there. She's always been really open about her mental health struggles, and she embraces them, and they contribute to what she makes. I really appreciate her art installations. She uses a style using polka dots or very repetitive circles to produce massive installations. And one of the most famous installations that she does are their infinite mirrors that she uses, and I find this incredible. So that's what I was trying to do. She's always colorful, so I was trying to do the polka dots and then reflections of light, and then I wanted to do an infinite mirror. Let me see if I can find something that she's produced. Infinite mirror. Yayoi Kusama. Let me see. She does amazing stuff. Let me just you've probably seen this before. See if I can. All right, so these are let me just I need to so these are her infinite mirrors. So this is something that she produces. She does something with a pumpkin. She does this. Hopefully you're able to see it, but she does incredible work.
Oh, wow.
So you see color, you see reflection.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to evoke to that. She does incredible stuff. So when I produced that, I wanted to use the element of color, the element of reflection, the element of use of light, and that's why by no means it's close to that, but I wanted to do a tribute to her.
No, I think it did her justice. It's so different than your other pieces. It shows the appreciation. It shows like the attempt to do something else. I love it.
I did something similar to the Keith Haring. So you see it. So this was a follow up. So it was a tribute to Keith Haring. So I wanted to use his elements, but I tried to do a modern approach to this. So for example, you will see coffee. You'll see the Ethereum logo here. This is his dog. So I use his dog. You see a man twerking. Then you see I think it's Leo DiCaprio man walking meme. So it was a fun approach to. So for example, keys for crypto. So it's another tribute to an awesome artist. In this case, pop art. You'll see the Bitcoin logo here, interpretation, but it's still giving my own element of okay, this is my contribution to what you've done, and of course overlaying over a skull, which I love. So I don't know. Those are the two tributes that I produced.
And they are amazing, and they are so the contrast between each other, so highly. It's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, the Yayoi one is my personal favorite. It's your piece that I like the most, and yeah, I'm always a little bit sad that I didn't got the chance to collect it.
Well, with Nifty Gateway, it's interesting because a lot of people are really impatient. So sometimes you see people listing at $50,000, and then it goes to 1,000 and then 2,000. So I personally collect a lot on Nifty Gateway. So sometimes I buy old pieces because they come down in value. So there's always opportunity
Mhm.
for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. Hopefully. On the technical side, what sort of hardware is needed to produce such detailed high-res pieces?
So you really need a good machine that can help you render. So video cards. Some people use render farms. I use my MacBook Pro, and I can tell you sometimes when I'm producing those skulls, it takes 12 to 16 hours to render. And when you render
Damn.
something, it's just useless. Your machine is useless for 12 to 16 hours. And then if you're as lucky as me, you're rendering and then you don't spot the error until it finishes rendering. So that's another 12 to 16 hours that you need to put together to make sure you correct it. And then you're not entirely happy with it. So you change the lights and that's another 12 to 16 hours to render. So it can become an issue. I've heard Carlos Marcial, for example, and a few others that they use render farms, online farms, to render. So that gives you the power to render quickly. Although some of these tools are giving you a really good understanding of how it's going to look. So they mock up, they call it real time rendering. It's close, but it gives you a good idea
Mhm.
of how it's going to look. So you need a powerful machine, no doubt about that. For if you're trying to do something with heavy texture, the Yayoi, I think it was 20 hours to render. And then in terms of the tools that you're using, because this is something that I always get from people that want to start art, what tools did I use? And it's no secret. The tool itself will give you some capacity to do what you're trying to do, but it won't produce Coldy. It won't produce a Hakatao. It won't produce. You still need to invest the time. So in terms of the tools that I use the full Adobe suite. So Illustrator, Dimension, Photoshop, ZBrush for creating the 3D models, Substance Painter to create more complex colorings and more complex textures. If I'm on the go in the iPad or something, I want to create something quick, it's Forge or Gravity Sketch. If I'm on the computer and trying to produce something that's more like a building or something, I use Fusion 360. And of course, if you want to draw, because I illustrate too, I use Procreate on my iPad. So there's a bunch of tools. A lot of the artists use the same, and it's funny once you start creating, you know exactly which tools they're using, which is always interesting.
Yeah, okay. Some great deal of knowledge there, everyone. If you want to start, yeah.
And if you have questions, ping me. I can help you and tell you if you're looking for texture, what to use. If you're looking for drawing, what to use. There's no secret. There's a lot of tutorials out there, and a lot of the artists do tutorials. So any questions, just hit me up, and I'll help you.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really appreciated. I'm sure you're gonna get a few requests.
I get them every day. It's all right. Not a problem.
Nice. All right. So okay, that was more on the rendering and PC part, like the machine side of stuff. But on
Mhm.
the creative side, how long does each piece usually takes to be made?
It's an interesting question because there's no, for example, let me give you like, so this one, the Yayoi, this one, they're all variations of the same school to some degree and at different stages. So, and it's a combination of different approaches. So for example, the material that I'm using here, which is the really intricate brushed metal that is being used here, that took
Mm-hmm.
me weeks to produce and refine and to understand the approach that I wanted to take. And once you do that, you're able to use that same design element and produce something like this, right? So you see the same brush strokes and you can change it. But the concept of doing that material took me weeks to produce. To actually produce a skull, for example, it depends. I can produce a skull in 3 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours. So when I'm doing the Nifty Gateway drops, sometimes I spend 2-3 days on one piece, but it's a combination of different efforts that ultimately come up to one specific piece. I never start from a deadline and then produce reverse. I always have 25 projects that I'm creating, and ultimately 7 come together to produce a piece. So I would say once you have all the elements, let's say 3 to 6 hours. Getting all the elements together, I don't know, it can be 3 weeks to a month to actually produce everything that you're trying to bring into together. And then ultimately, once you're creating the piece, you understand which of these elements you want to use. So I gave you a complicated answer. Hopefully that made sense.
No, it makes total sense actually, and got me thinking because when you talk about the materials and the brushes and like this intricate pattern, as you said, it gets me thinking about like how the reflectiveness and the color completely changes the impression that it gives me. For example, this black one, it looks like graphite, and then you
That's
pointed
perfect.
out like it's the same brush that's over it on the other one that looks completely like metal. So yeah, it's very interesting how those tools come together and they produce very, very different results.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would tell you is, in going back to the other questions about the tools, is that I used to rely on the tools a lot for reflections, for lights, for materials. Now what I'm doing is I'm producing my own. So let me see if I can. Let me see if I can do Nifty Gateway. Sorry, I'm just trying to see if I can pull one of the artworks that I produced there. 1 second.
No worries.
Kites profile. All right, let me see. Let me minimize this here. Okay, so if you're an artist, you see two things. So you see your collectibles, your drops. Only the artist sees this, and then you see your collection. But in terms of
Sorry about that.
you're learning French. All right, so let's.
I have
So
no
for
idea
example,
who that was.
so for example, this one, I'm using something that I. So my background, I was born in Mexico. I from a Spanish family, from the north end of Spain, and then half of my family is also Lebanese. So I've always been enamored by the patterns of the Arab world and Persians. I think they're beautiful. So for example, for this piece, I ended up using a pattern that I found uh, a long time ago, and I kept wanting to use it, which is an image of a floor tile in some building, old Persian building. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
you see here, and then I overlaid a gold leaf on top of it, and this is a lotus leaf. So the lotus leaf here on this is just, it signifies a new beginning, a fresh start. Um, so this is a good example of, for example, you see the brush strokes here of something that I took something that was standard, and then I started to modify it myself. So on the pieces that you'll see
Yes.
come up this year, and then towards the end of last year, I think the mid last year, a lot of the materials, a lot of the lights are things that I've created myself, and that's just my natural evolution to say, oh, perfect. So I'm using this tool, but now I'm creating my own to create my, not only my unique style, but my unique look and feel.
Oh, sounds very exciting, man. Honestly, like, yeah. No, I see what you mean. I look at this piece and I think like it's very it's very cool. Like the conjunction that you made from the gold and the pattern. Uh, yeah, I want to be able to contrast that for the new pieces and how does it change when it's like you produced your own tools. Very
And this one
interesting.
is a different meaning too, right? So you have Middle Eastern, then you have lotus flower, which traditionally is more associated to Asian cultures, and the gold is something that across cultures and generations we've used to signify wealth or signify purity. So it has a deeper meaning, but it's being able to play with all of these. It's part of the fun.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I love this. Okay, so going back to VR headsets.
Mhm.
What do you like so much about them? Have you ever produced a piece using one?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier the VR headset for me is just it's a symbol of looking into the future, looking at an alternative reality, looking into what can become. Is it going to be a VR headset always? I'm not sure if it's going to be an element of another element that is associated with futurism. Definitely, the VR headset is it's associated with futurism, so that's why I use it. But the fact that you're able to alter your reality is very appealing to me. So
Mm-hmm.
so that's why I use it. How have I ever used one? For sure. Have I ever produced artwork with it? I haven't. I've used Tiltbrush for sure. I think I've used Mozilla Painter for to some degree. I recall PlayStation had their own VR solution also. So I played with this in the past. To me, they're still up and coming, and I say this with knowing that Giant Swan has totally takes it to the next level and produces amazing pieces with them.
Yes,
So it's a really
yes.
good example of a tool or of an artist that uses a tool, but then gives a totally different meaning. So, for example, let me go to my profile here. Let me go to this my collection here, but let me see if I can find. Yeah, so for example, Giant Swan produces. This is amazing, man. This is taking VR to the next level, and geez, he makes incredible stuff.
It's
So
awesome.
this is a good example of using the same tools that anybody else can use, and then go all in on it. Yep,
Yeah, this is mind blowing.
I agree. So that's why I collect Giant Swan. Not only because he's a great artist, he's an incredible person. I mean, I talk to him all the time. He's truly the embodiment of an artist for sure.
Would you do a collab?
Collaborations are interesting. They're not always easy, and when you want to collab with 3D artists, it's interesting because you can overlay patterns, you can overlay designs, and you can take it that way. So I've done a couple of those. They're always fun. Would I want to do a collab with Giant Swan? For sure, man. It's more for the opportunity to work with him. We'll see. I've only done two. I do them far and in between. I don't want to do a lot of collaborations, but it's always interesting to. It gives you an additional light into another artist and their approach. So it's always cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the projects that you're currently working on, and could we have a sneak peek?
All right, cool. So I just came back from being sick, so I don't have a lot going on, but I can tell you what I've been doing. I've been using this tool, Clone 3D. Yeah, so this one, it's a fashion design software. I like clothing and I like to explore with designs. This is a really cool tool. So it's basically designing on the fly. I know that people would have not guessed that I would be doing clothing, but it's something that I find really appealing. I've been playing with this for a while, and you're basically able to model and create stuff on the go. If you're interested in clothing, and I think the metaverse is going in that direction where people are producing clothing for their own avatars, and I think that's where it's going. If you want to test it out, try this tool. So this is something that I've been using and I've been playing with for about a month. That's something that I've been doing. I have a few
Mm-hmm.
things in the works. I'm not gonna expose my hand too much, but I'll make a commitment when I'm ready. The first community that I will share it with, it's gonna be with Will.
That's fair. Keep your secrets for a while then. But you're right. I would never have expected clothes.
And
That's
it's
interesting.
just one thing. Before that, it was music. I used to make music for movies, and I really go deep into different areas of experimentation. Sometimes without knowing that I'm going in that direction, and it's all fair game. I really enjoy the creative process and understanding how far you can push it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do some design assets as well, right? Like logos and stuff.
Yeah, from time to time. I'm not the best at it, but for sure I'm happy to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to ask about trying other styles, but now you already said clothing, so I guess that's definitely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
A theme that you often portray in your pieces is the rebellion against the system. What are some art movements that you have drawn inspiration from and represent with this motif?
Yeah, so it's a rebellion against probably the system to some degree. And so I've said it before. I grew up
Today
in
is
Mexico. I
the
grew up in
opening.
the north of Mexico, in an area that was controlled by the cartels. So the Juarez cartel was there.
Yeah.
So my neighbors were were part of the Juarez cartel. So again, it's something that I don't like to talk about much, but I saw a lot of really bad things happen growing up, and I was overly exposed to violence and stuff
Mhm.
as a result of being in that part of Mexico. So it's um it's not really entirely a rebellion against the system. It's a rebellion against fear and being accepting that that's your future. I see it in the States, for example, right now, and I draw parallels into what happened in Mexico. In Mexico, it Mexico is a very quiet country. It's a very warm country in terms of the people, in terms of what you can do, in terms of how you can live with very little. And it got bad, and it got bad starting by minor things, minor events, an uptick in violence, and then got out of control. And in the States, it's happening the same way, where people are fed up with the system. They're fed up with a few things. They start protests. Now there's bombings. Um, so it's a good time to speak up and make changes before something that you cannot really protect yourself against happens. So I think it's a rebellion against that, against fear and against not being able to speak up. In terms of inspiration, every art, I guess, cycle starts with some degree of inspirations. For example, in Renaissance, so there's a period that they call the Dutch Golden Age, which was around the late 1500s to mid 1600s, which was an era where the Dutch military, the trade, science, the Dutch were really advanced at that point, and that really evolved. A lot of artists are produced, so it really inspired artists. So Rembrandt, you see the Night Watch, you see Vermeer, which is a really good hacker artist. The girl with the pearl earring, View of Delft. There's a bunch of that. Frans
Mhm.
Hals, Girardeau, Jan Steen. So they get inspired from a moment in time in Dutch history where they were on top. Then you have artists that are so I really like that period in time, and I like Renaissance, but I really like the Dutch Golden Age as a personal favorite. Then you see artists that get inspired by war and war events. So, for example, Roy Lichtenstein with Wham, pop art. You've probably seen that one. Picasso painting Guernica, and it was a response to a bombing of the Basque country by the Nazi Germans, right? Keith Haring does a lot of
Yes.
pieces for related to AIDS, and then you see a lot of people or a lot of artists that are really relevant right now. So Shepard Fairey, Banksy, Ai Weiwei, they're really activist artists, right? So everyone that I mentioned there has some influence to some degree, but I really go back and study the classic. I think that's what inspires me the most. Yeah.
Very interesting. That's a very big assortment of artists.
It is, and I like the classes the most. I Renaissance, early Renaissance, early Northern Renaissance, which is the 1400s, leading to the Renaissance, which is, if memory serves me right, is 1500s, 1600s, then to Baroque art, which is 1600 to 1700s.
Yes.
That's where I love that period of art history is what I love the most. So if you ever want to talk classic art, let me know. I'm happy to do it. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, what's not to admire over there, right? It's so impressive.
And they didn't have Adobe, they didn't have Procreate, they didn't have any of those. These guys were Vermeer, Johannes Vermeer. There's if you're interested, there's let me see if I can find the Tim's Vermeer. There was all right, so let me just see if I can pull that to this side. 1 second. if you're interested in an art related documentary, Tim's Vermeer, which is this one right here. So this is a guy that studied Vermeer, and Vermeer is so you've seen his pieces. Let me Johannes Vermeer. So the girl with the pearl tattoo.
Oh yeah, of course.
He produces really intricate works, and that specific documentary talks about the fact that he was actually cheating. He was using optics to be able to cast shadows, to cast reflections, and what this guy did is he actually used the same methods that Vermeer used in order to reproduce an artwork, and he was really close or really good at it. And to me, he's one of those. Vermeer it's a hacker of his time. He used tools that were available to him to produce something that maybe with skill he would have not been able to accomplish. So
Mhm.
if you're looking for an art related documentary, watch this one. I think it should be on Netflix or something like that. Yeah, this is a really interesting one.
Yeah, we'll definitely take a look. Just the ingenuity to do what you like, what you're saying. That's mind blowing.
Yep, and we have a bunch of Vermeers nowadays with modern tools and stuff. But it's all fair game. If you produce something that's compelling and appealing to somebody, that's awesome.
Of course, of course. So, all right, on a different theme of question. Given
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you have such technical knowledge in diverse areas, what are some challenges you think NFTs and crypto art in general still will need to overcome in the near future?
Yeah, so we see it now, right? So Jim talks a lot about um, on-chain data. I think that's pretty valid. I think that's something that should be a standard or set up as a standard. You need a lot of interoperability between platforms. You need to be able to grab your Nifty Gateway token and then be able to sell it in OpenSea. And then if somebody picks it up in Rarible, it should be transparent. It should be the royalties carry over, the data carries over. So that's something that needs to happen from a standardization perspective. And whoever embraces this will win, in my opinion. The second thing is we need to make it stupidly easy for artists to be able to tokenize. Artists are artists. There's a lot of technical artists in this space, and as a result of how difficult it is to tokenize. Um,
Yes.
it, right now, you can tokenize on Ethereum, which is, in my opinion, is the leading NFT platform as of now. But it's super complicated. I mean, just setting up a wallet and then you either do MetaMask or there's a few other tools, and then you start figuring out how to transfer Ether into your wallet, and then you start tokenizing, and the transaction gets stuck. So now you have to readjust the nonce to the original transaction. So
Yes.
you revert it, and that's you've lost 90% of the artist there for sure. So we need to make it stupidly easy for the artist to do this. And then from the collector perspective, cash is still king, and they platforms that are they're tying back to dollars, regardless of what happens in the background, are the ones that are leading the way. And the other thing, what happens is that crypto is very volatile. So, for example, my pieces on Super Rare. Let me just pull this here. I still have 3 pieces on Super Rare. And what I had to do is because of the rise of Ether, I had to adjust the pricing of those. So for example, if I see this one here,
Yeah, this is a never-ending discussion, right? Like, do you really just like is stick to a price in ETH and never change, or do you
yeah,
always adjust and then it would be better off just having a dollar, right?
exactly. So what I did is I did the running average of what I was selling. So based on additions and one of ones that I was selling around pieces around 11 or 12 Ether for one of ones, which at the time would equate to about $5,000. Then
Mm-hmm.
Ether exploded. So, for example, William Savage, which is a good friend of mine, he offered 5 Ether when uh, that would have been $2,000 more or less. Now I'm actually asking for 5 Ether, which is $5,000, which is the original price that I had in mind. So, do
Yes.
you always keep adjusting the price? And it to me, it's not a problem, but a lot of artists they cannot be, and then price of gas is expensive, so they cannot be readjusting the price and then spending $20-$30 every time they need to adjust their price. So to me, there's another opportunity there to settle in and die, or something that's more or that's stable, so the artists don't have to do this, right? So there's a ton of opportunity. People talk about chains. People talk about which one's going to be the leading one. Artists don't care, and collectors ultimately, if you really want to embrace the broader set of people that would want to collect digital art, make it stupidly easy for both sides.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree.
Okay.
So I have a last one. One. Hopefully difficult. All right, because I wanna see you struggle. But if you had to choose, what would be your single most favorite NFT that you own?
Oh man, that's a very difficult question. There's artists that I really like. So, for example, Reynard Schmidt who's an artist that does. He uses graphite to paint on glass, which is amazing. I really love his pieces, but that's my connection with him. Lucio Poletti does incredible work. He's more into Bitcoin and propaganda art. Band's really good. Giant Swan is amazing. But if I had to pick one, it's a recent one that I collected. I was blown away because of the fact that it's a short film by let's see. Yeah, so this one, Hallows by Alan Priester. I don't know if you've watched it, because it's an actual movie.
Oh, please send me the link.
but it's a movie with sound, and with it's over 2 minutes of really cool. I'm listening into my earpiece, but it's ridiculous. It's amazing. Then if you look at let me see, Adam Priester. Adam Priester. He has it here where you can watch this incredible work. So I would say now that is my favorite. There's a few artists that so for example, it's this one, and you go to work, and it combines a lot of work into it. So this one right here, so it's a short film. That's probably my favorite. It's a one-on-one that I bought on Nifty Gateway. Thank you to my friend Stagflation that told me that piece was available. So that's there. And then a lot of the recent pieces I'm really fond of. So for example, this guy's Stan Orlans is a new artist from Belgium. This is Carlos Marcial with Sky Gold, which I love. This is Giant Swan. I love a lot of those, but definitely this one is this is my favorite that I own. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see you collecting colorful stuff.
Yes, it's a contrast of my real life. I really love pastels, and you can see this is pink.
Yeah,
this is pink. This is pink. This is pink. So you know how to get
that. That's exactly what I was thinking. Well, Ekaitza, I don't want to take much of your time. I really appreciated the time we spent together today. It was very, very nice having some insight on how your mind works and how you turn schools, and this is what I think it's so impressive. You turn schools into a canvas. Of course, I would have seen other places like a golden school, all right, but it's not just a golden school. You have the motifs, the patterns, and I absolutely love it. So thank you so very much for taking the time to be here with us. I'm sure the audience liked as well. And yeah, everyone, this is Ekaitza, one of our chief partners. Thank you, man.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, Jen. And anybody that has any question, happy to answer any questions. After this, I'm going into a meeting right now, which is the reality of life. But yeah, happy to stick around or come in a little bit later and answer any questions. And glad to have you as a community. I'm proud to be part of Well as a Chief Partner. Hope you are too. And until next time.
Oh, definitely am. Thank you, man. Looking forward to what's to come. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Cheers. Bye.